A river's sudden turn could make or break an empire. This is the story of Canal Gambits that redrew our economic maps, a tale of human ambition wrestling with the raw power of nature to reshape entire civilizations. You will understand how the flow of water has dictated the flow of wealth across centuries, uncovering the hidden connections between ancient engineering and modern power. Why did some of history's greatest waterworks lead to stunning prosperity while others collapsed into ruin? And what forgotten lessons do their failures hold for us today? What do you believe is the ultimate price for trying to command a river? That same relentless power that built civilizations could also erase them in an instant. Rivers are not the static blue lines we see on a map. They are living, breathing entities that have confounded human plans for millennia. Take the Yellow River in China, a waterway so prone to catastrophic flooding it earned the mournful name, China's Sorrow. Its floods have killed millions and toppled entire dynasties, a stark reminder that water does not recognize our borders or our authority. But what force drives a river to abandon its own bed? The answer lies in a constant negotiation between gravity, geology, and time. Hydrologist Dr. Lena Petrova puts it perfectly, noting that humans are simply latecomers to that negotiating table. A river's journey is shaped by the sediment it carries, a slow, steady buildup of silt that can raise the riverbed until the water has no choice but to spill over and find a new, lower path. Tectonic shifts deep below the surface can tilt the land, subtly redirecting the flow. And then there are the extreme weather events, the monumental storms that deliver more water than any channel can possibly hold. When you understand this inherent volatility, you start to see canal projects for what they truly were: colossal high-stakes bets. They were not mere construction projects. They were declarations of war against the raw, shifting power of the planet itself. Every attempt to dig a new channel was a wager that human ingenuity could outsmart the very forces that carved the continent. And as we see how rivers consistently defy our control, we can only begin to appreciate the sheer audacity of those who ever believed they could be tamed. 4,000 years before our common era, the first great gambit was already underway in the Fertile Crescent. The Sumerians did not see the Tigris and Euphrates as enemies to be conquered, but as unpredictable life-givers that needed to be gently persuaded. Their world was one of feast or famine, entirely dependent on the river's moods, so they began to dig not with machines but with countless hands and simple tools, carving the first large-scale irrigation channels into the earth. This was not just ditch digging, it was a profound collaboration between farmers who understood the land and priests who tracked the seasons, a unified effort to shield their fragile cities from starvation. The result was nothing short of a revolution. Canals meant controlled water, and controlled water meant surplus grain. Cities like and Uruk exploded into vibrant hubs of civilization, their storehouses overflowing. This newfound wealth did not just stay within their walls, it flowed along newly established trade routes, connecting Mesopotamia to distant lands and building the world's first complex economy. For a time, it seemed humanity had won its bet against nature, but the rivers were not finished. Each watering cycle left behind tiny, invisible salts, a slow poison accumulating in the soil. Season after season, year after year, this salinity built up until the land itself turned against them. The wheat yields plummeted, the agricultural foundation of their empire crumbled. They had solved the immediate crisis of flood and drought, only to create a slower, more insidious disaster. The Sumerians' brilliance gave them centuries of prosperity, yet their story serves as a timeless warning. The most successful gambit can still carry a hidden cost, a debt that nature will collect in its own time. While the Sumerians struggled with a slow poisoning of their soil, another civilization was mastering a different kind of river. The Nile was Egypt's predictable, rhythmic heart. Every year, without fail, its floodwaters would swell, deposit a layer of rich, black silt across the valley, and then recede. This was the pulse of the kingdom, a blessing that promised life, but also a force that demanded absolute control. A flood too high could wipe out villages, while one too low meant famine. So the pharaohs embarked on their own monumental canal gambit, not just to survive the river, but to command its very rhythm. Pharaoh Senusret III looked beyond the natural valley to a vast depression known as the Fayum Oasis. His vision was to harness a branch of the Nile, diverting its life-giving waters through a network of canals to transform this arid basin into a sprawling, fertile breadbasket. The scale of this project was staggering. Thousands of workers, using little more than copper chisels and baskets woven from reeds, moved mountains of earth. They carved channels with such precise gradients that water would flow steadily for miles, all judged by the human eye and simple water levels. This was hydrological genius on a colossal scale. As historian Dr. Amara Colonial notes, the pharaohs did not just build tombs, they built waterworks that defined their legacy. The success of the Fayum project and canals like it did more than just prevent hunger. This managed abundance of food fueled the entire Egyptian economy, paying for the armies that secured its borders and the legions of artisans who raised the pyramids and temples that still awe us today. For centuries, this control over the Nile cemented Egypt's economic dominance, making it the richest kingdom in the ancient world. Yet this prosperity was built on a fragile assumption that the river's course was eternal. When shifts in the Nile's path did occur, whether from sediment buildup or climatic changes, the entire system faltered. Canals that once brimmed with water ran dry. The engineered breadbaskets withered. The result was not just crop failure, but political collapse, as a people who had believed they mastered their god river were reminded of their ultimate dependence. The pharaoh's gambit was a triumph that lasted for ages, yet it held a sobering lesson. Even the most stable partnership with a river is only temporary. Rome's answer to water scarcity was not to plead with the rivers, but to conquer them from above. While the Egyptians mastered the Nile's floodplains, Roman engineers performed a different kind of magic, lifting water into the sky on graceful stone arches. The Aqua Pia, Rome's first aqueduct, was a marvel of its age. Completed in the year 312 before the Common Era, it was essentially a river in a stone box, a channel meticulously graded to carry fresh spring water for 11 miles entirely by gravity, right into the heart of the city. This was not just about drinking water. This steady, reliable flow powered a new urban existence. It fed public baths that were centers of social life, supplied fountains on every corner, and turned water wheels for milling grain and processing leather in massive tanneries. This infrastructure allowed Rome to swell to an unprecedented 1 million inhabitants, a density impossible without engineered water. The aqueduct was the city's circulatory system, and commerce was its lifeblood. But the Roman gambit extended far beyond the capital. As the empire stretched across the known world, its canals served as the supply lines for its armies and its economy. In southern Gaul, the Fosse Mariani was a strategic canal dug to connect the Rhone River directly to the Mediterranean Sea. This single waterway shaved weeks off the journey for grain ships coming from Egypt, ensuring the vital wheat supply for Rome could bypass the treacherous coastal waters of the Ligurian Sea. This was economic engineering on an imperial scale, binding the provinces together through calculated hydrological shortcuts. The entire system, from the soaring aqueducts to the strategic canals, reveals a profound truth. The Romans did not just build isolated water projects, they wove them into a single, integrated economic machine. Water access directly translated into urban growth, industrial output, and military reach. Yet this magnificent system rested on two fragile pillars: slave labor and absolute centralized control. The endless supply of captives that built and maintained these structures was a resource that could not last forever. And when political instability shook the empire, when maintenance was deferred and legions were recalled, the system began to fray. Aqueducts clogged, canals silted up, and the economic engine they powered slowly ground to a halt. The Roman gambit proved that water could be harnessed to build a world-spanning civilization, but it also revealed a critical weakness. A system built on such immense, forced effort could not sustain itself once the will to command it was gone. While Rome's aqueducts carried water over land, an even more audacious project was taking shape on the other side of the world. Stretching over 1,100 miles, China's Grand Canal was not just a waterway but an aquatic spine, deliberately engineered to fuse the empire's northern and southern halves into a single, unified body. The Sui dynasty emperors commanded a workforce of millions, a human river of labor that reshaped the very earth to link the turbulent Yellow River with the mighty Yangtze. This was not merely a construction project, it was an act of sheer political will, a gambit to conquer distance itself. The canal became a bustling highway for grain barges carrying vital tax rice from the fertile south to feed the populous north, for silks that would adorn imperial courts, and for troops that could be rushed to quell unrest in any province. It bound the empire's economy into an interdependent whole, making the dangerous coastal sea voyages obsolete and creating a sheltered artery for unprecedented cultural and technological exchange across regions. Scholar Lai Wai perfectly captures its role, calling the Grand Canal China's internet, a network that moved information and goods at the speed of water. Its success was so profound it cemented Beijing's status as the capital for centuries, its survival directly tied to the canal's flow. Yet this magnificent achievement demanded a perpetual price. The same rivers it connected were constantly trying to bury it. Siltation from the Yellow River threatened to choke its channels, while floods could rupture its banks, requiring an endless, costly campaign of dredging and repair by an army of maintenance workers. For hundreds of years, the imperial bureaucracy managed this delicate balancing act. But in the 19th century, as dynasties weakened and attention turned elsewhere, the monumental effort of upkeep became unsustainable. The canal that had once pulsed with the lifeblood of an empire slowly began to silt up and fragment, a stark lesson in how even the mightiest human creations are ultimately temporary, vulnerable to the dual forces of natural change and human neglect. For the Dutch, surrounded by the North Sea's relentless tides and the delta of three great rivers, the fight for survival was a daily reality. Their very land was a battleground, and their opponent was the ocean itself. Their response was not a single canal, but an entire system of defense and creation, a network of dikes, windmills, and canals that performed a kind of hydrological alchemy, turning watery marshes into solid, fertile ground known as polders. In the 16th century, this effort reached a new scale of ambition. Entire communities pooled their wealth and labor to undertake massive projects like draining the vast Beemster Lake. Imagine the scene: dozens of windmills standing like sentinels, their sails spinning tirelessly to pump the lake dry, revealing a geometric grid of rich, black soil perfectly laid out with drainage canals. This was not just land reclamation, it was the birth of a new, highly productive agricultural heartland. The rich pastures of the Beemster soon became famous for their dairy cattle, and this agricultural surplus fueled booming exports of cheese and butter, pumping wealth into the growing urban centers of Amsterdam and Rotterdam. But this incredible feat of engineering demanded a new form of social organization. To manage the constant, shared threat of water, the Dutch formed local water boards or waterschappen. These were among the world's first democratic institutions, where every landowner, from the wealthiest merchant to the humblest farmer, had a stake and a voice in maintaining the vital dikes and canals. This was governance born from absolute necessity, a model of cooperation that proved you could not command a river alone. The Dutch Gambit literally built their nation, acre by reclaimed acre, forging an economic powerhouse from the seabed. Yet this triumph came with a profound and lasting vulnerability. By living on land that was often below sea level, they had placed themselves in the direct path of every storm surge. The very system that protected them also concentrated the risk, creating a scenario where a single dike failure could spell catastrophe. They had mastered their environment, but in doing so, they learned a harsh, enduring lesson. Water never forgets its domain, and it is always waiting for an opportunity to reclaim what was once its own. This ancient struggle between the Dutch and the sea echoes powerfully in our own era of rising oceans and intensifying storms, a timeless reminder that our greatest engineering triumphs can also create our most existential challenges. The quiet English countryside soon echoed with the sound of pickaxes and the shouts of navvies, as a new kind of river was carved into the earth. This was the era of Canal Mania, an 18th century frenzy where Britain's landscape was deliberately rewired for profit. It began not with a king's decree, but with a duke's desperation. The Duke of Bridgewater owned coal mines, but the cost of transporting his coal overland to the hungry factories of Manchester was crippling. His solution was audacious. He would build his own river, a canal that ran directly from his mines to the city. Completed in 1761, the Bridgewater Canal was an instant success, slashing the price of coal in half and proving that purpose-built waterways were an economic superweapon. Suddenly, a torrent of private investment flooded into canal companies. Speculators and merchants scrambled to fund new routes, dreaming of similar fortunes. Parliament was inundated with acts for new canals, creating a sprawling, man-made network that stitched the nation's industrial heartlands together. For the first time, heavy, bulky goods like coal, iron, and clay could be moved reliably and cheaply, far from the unpredictable currents of natural rivers. Factories were no longer tethered to riverbanks. They could spring up anywhere a canal reached, reshaping the very geography of industry and accelerating urban sprawl. The great economist Adam Smith saw this transformation firsthand and celebrated canals as fundamental drivers of what he called the wealth of nations. He understood that by radically lowering transport costs, these waterways were not just moving goods, they were creating entirely new markets and multiplying national prosperity. But this mania had a dark undercurrent. Canal shares became the object of wild speculation, their prices inflating into a classic economic bubble that inevitably burst, ruining many over-eager investors. And the new industrial landscape came at a steep environmental price. The very factories the canals supplied belched smoke into the skies, while the waterways themselves often became polluted industrial sewers. The canal's reign, however, was stunningly brief. The same inventive spirit that built them soon gave birth to a faster, more powerful rival, the railway. Within a few decades, the steam locomotive began to outpace the plodding canal barge, and one by one, these man-made rivers fell silent. Tracks were laid along old towpaths, and viaducts spanned the abandoned channels. Yet their legacy is permanently etched into the British landscape, in the serpentine lines of water that still wend through cities, and in the very logic of modern logistics they helped invent. The rise and fall of the canals is a powerful lesson in creative destruction, showing how a transportation revolution can fuel an unprecedented economic boom, only to be itself rendered obsolete by the next great leap forward. The age of steam and steel demanded a new kind of shortcut, one that would shrink the world itself. In 1869, a French diplomat named Ferdinand de Lesseps achieved what pharaohs and emperors had only dreamed of. He cut a sea-level canal across the 120-mile Isthmus of Suez. This was not a canal for barges but for ocean-going steamships, a direct aquatic highway linking the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. The technical hurdles were monstrous, from combating cholera among the workforce to moving mountains of sand without modern machinery. Yet de Lesseps, armed more with relentless optimism than engineering expertise, marshaled the capital and political will to see it through. The moment the channel opened, the economic map of the world was instantly redrawn. The interminable, dangerous voyage around the southern tip of Africa was suddenly obsolete. The journey from London to Bombay was slashed by over 5,000 miles, a staggering reduction in time, cost, and risk. This single ditch in the desert became the main street of global commerce. It supercharged the flow of goods, flooding European markets with Indian tea and bringing Egyptian cotton to Lancashire mills at unprecedented speed. But this new flow of wealth also solidified the grip of European colonial empires, giving them a swift, secure stranglehold on their Asian territories. As naval historian Professor Elena Torres observes, the Suez Canal did not just change maps, it changed the balance of power. Its very existence made control of this narrow waterway a paramount strategic objective for any nation with global ambitions. This immense value, however, transformed the canal into a permanent flashpoint. The Suez Crisis of 1956 saw Egypt nationalize the waterway, triggering a military confrontation that humbled old empires and announced the rise of a new world order. Even today, its narrow confines are vulnerable to disruptions, from blockages by grounded container ships to the threat of piracy. The Suez Gambit delivered unparalleled global prosperity, but it also forged a permanent link between economic vitality and geopolitical tension, proving that a canal which brings the world closer together can also become its most precarious choke point. While the Suez Canal conquered a desert, the Panama Canal faced a far more formidable enemy, a dense, mountainous jungle. This was the ultimate test of 20th century engineering, a project that would not just link two oceans but announce the arrival of a new global power. The United States took over the failed French effort, confronting a nightmare of landslides and tropical disease. The real victory, however, happened not in the excavation sites but in the hospitals. Dr. William Gorges waged a war against mosquitoes, draining swamps and installing screens to defeat yellow fever and malaria, proving that conquering the environment was a medical battle as much as an engineering one. The result was the Panama Canal, a 50-mile waterway that opened in 1914. But this was no simple ditch like Suez, because the Pacific Ocean is actually higher than the Atlantic at that point. The canal required a system of massive, ingenious locks. These colossal concrete chambers act like aquatic elevators, lifting enormous ships 85 feet up to the artificial Gatun Lake, and then gently lowering them down the other side. The effect on global trade was instantaneous and profound. A ship traveling from New York to San Francisco no longer had to brave the treacherous 16,000-mile journey around Cape Horn. The new route was a mere 5,000 miles, slashing weeks off the voyage and unleashing a torrent of commerce between the American East and West coasts. This was more than a convenience, it was an economic revolution. the canal didn't just connect oceans, it connected American factories to new markets, its farms to global supply chains, and its navy to both hemispheres simultaneously. It cemented the United States as a two-ocean power, a strategic advantage that would define its role on the world stage for the next century. Yet this monumental achievement was shadowed by a controversial birth. To secure the land for the canal, the United States actively supported Panama's secession from Colombia, effectively engineering a new nation to suit its own strategic needs. This act of political manipulation set a precedent for American intervention in the region that would resonate for decades, and the environmental cost was equally profound. The creation of Gatun Lake flooded vast tracts of jungle, displacing communities and permanently altering the hydrology of the Chagres River. The freshwater flows that local ecosystems depended on were now dedicated to filling and flushing the canal's locks, a demand that continues to this day. The Panama Canal stands as a breathtaking monument to human will, a gambit that rewrote the rules of global shipping and projected American power across the globe. But its legacy is a dual one, a reminder that even our greatest triumphs are often built on a foundation of complex political choices and lasting ecological change. The 20th century brought a new kind of gambler to the table, armed not with copper tools but with 5-year plans and absolute political will. In the vastness of the Soviet Union, engineers conceived of a project that dwarfed all that came before, the wholesale reversal of Siberia's great rivers. Their vision was to capture the water that flowed uselessly as they saw it into the Arctic Ocean and force it southward to make the deserts of Central Asia bloom. Canals like the 800-mile-long Kara-Kum were dug with heroic fervor, their channels cutting across the Turkmen desert like stark, straight scars. For a time, the gambit appeared to work. The water arrived, and the cotton fields exploded in a sea of white, transforming the region into a vast agricultural factory that churned out bumper harvests and fulfilled state quotas. This was more than an economic plan. It was a potent symbol of socialist triumph over a hostile nature. But the rivers were not merely flowing in a new direction, they were being bled dry. Every gallon diverted to the cotton fields was a gallon stolen from its final destination, the Aral Sea. Slowly, inevitably, the inland sea began to die. As geographer Dr. Ivan Popov reflects, we thought we could command nature, but nature always commands back. The shoreline retreated for miles, leaving a ghost fleet of fishing trawlers stranded in a desert of salt and sand. The local climate grew more extreme, and toxic dust from the exposed seabed, laced with pesticides from the cotton farms, poisoned the air and the people. The Soviet gambit achieved its narrow economic goal, but at a cost so profound it serves as a global cautionary tale. It demonstrates with terrifying clarity how a single-minded focus on production, divorced from ecological reality, can trade a temporary boom for a permanent bust. The political ideology that demanded the conquest of nature ultimately created a monument to its own hubris, a stark, dry basin where a sea once thrived. It forces us to ask a difficult question: what is the true price of a harvest when the currency is a vanished ecosystem? The American Southwest was transformed by a document signed in a single afternoon. In 1922, representatives from 7 states gathered to divide the waters of the Colorado River, a legal gambit that would unleash decades of unprecedented growth. They carved up the river into 2 basins, the upper and the lower, assigning each a fixed share of the water they believed flowed perpetually from the Rockies to the Gulf of California. This was an act of supreme optimism, a bet on a future written in water law. That bet was soon backed by concrete and steel on a scale the world had never seen. The Hoover Dam, a colossus rising from the Black Canyon in the 1930s, was more than an engineering marvel. it was the physical embodiment of the compact. It tamed the river's violent spring floods, storing its lifeblood in the vast reservoir of Lake Mead. With this controlled flow, the desert began to bloom in ways that defied nature. Canals snaked across the sun-baked landscape, carrying water hundreds of miles to irrigate vast fields of lettuce in Arizona and almonds in California. This engineered abundance fueled the explosive growth of sprawling cities like Los Angeles and Phoenix, creating an oasis civilization in a land that otherwise could not have supported it. Yet the foundation of this miracle was fatally flawed. The politicians and engineers of the 1920s had based their allocations on a period of unusually high river flow, a wet anomaly mistaken for the norm. They promised more water than the river could ever consistently give. For decades, the reservoirs were full enough to mask the error, but as populations swelled and the climate warmed, the debt came due. The river's flow has shrunk. Lake Mead's bathtub ring of white mineral deposits a stark monument to over-allocation. The very system designed to prevent conflict now fuels it, with states locked in tense negotiations over their shrinking shares. The Colorado River Compact is a powerful testament to how a grand hydrological gambit can build a regional economy, yet it also reveals the peril of building that future on a miscalculation. It forces us to confront a difficult truth that the most ambitious attempts to command a river can create a dependency so deep that the entire system trembles when the water finally runs low. In the monsoon-drenched landscapes of South Asia, the arrival of the rains is the true calendar of life. British colonial engineers saw this seasonal deluge not as a rhythm to be followed, but as a problem to be solved. Their grand gambit, the Ganges Canal, completed in 1854, was a web of masonry weirs and meticulously graded channels designed to conquer the plains of Punjab. This was hydraulic imperialism in action, an attempt to replace the uncertainty of the clouds with the certainty of the canal gate. The results were transformative. Vast, arid tracts of land were suddenly awash with reliable water, creating a wheat belt so productive it was dubbed the breadbasket of the empire. This agricultural boom did more than just fill granaries. It directly fueled the expansion of the Indian railway network, as the British needed efficient ways to move this new bounty to port cities for export. For a time, the specter of famine seemed to retreat, yet this imported model of water management came with a heavy, unseen cost. It bulldozed over centuries-old local traditions, where communities had managed water through intricate, shared systems of tanks and channels. The British replaced this cooperative wisdom with a rigid, centralized bureaucracy that prioritized cash crops for export over subsistence farming for local need. And just as in ancient Sumeria, the gift of constant irrigation carried a slow poison, waterlogged soils began to accumulate salts, steadily degrading the very land the canals were meant to enrich. Today, independent India grapples with this complex legacy on an even grander scale. The proposed interlinking of rivers project is a 21st-century gambit of breathtaking ambition, a plan to physically connect 37 rivers across the subcontinent to move water from flood-prone regions to parched ones. Proponents see it as the ultimate technological fix for water scarcity, a national network that could end droughts and boost food security. But critics hear echoes of the colonial past, warning that such monumental engineering could displace millions, destroy fragile ecosystems, and repeat the error of imposing a single, top-down solution on a deeply diverse and culturally rich hydrological landscape. The story of India's canals is a powerful lesson in continuity. It shows that every water gambit is more than an engineering feat, it is a cultural choice. The critical question is not just whether we can move a river, but who decides its new course and what ancient rhythms we might irrevocably break in the process. A river that belongs to everyone can end up being protected by no one. This is the profound challenge facing the Mekong, a waterway that threads through 6 nations, each with its own desperate needs and ambitious plans. Here, the Canal Gambit has evolved into a delicate diplomatic dance, where a decision in an upstream capital can ripple downstream, eroding farmland and emptying fish nets for millions. The Mekong River Commission was created to be the stage for this dialogue, a forum where countries like China, Thailand, and Vietnam attempt to balance competing demands for water. Upstream, a cascade of new dams promises clean hydropower and economic growth, their reservoirs feeding canals that irrigate vast plantations. Downstream, in Vietnam's fertile Mekong Delta, that same withheld water means salty ocean water creeps further inland, poisoning rice paddies. The river's immense bounty is being divided, and the ledger is stark. On one side, booming rice exports and electrified cities. On the other, the collapse of a migratory fish catch that has fed generations. Environmental activist Somchai Lertwangrat captures the core of the problem with heartbreaking clarity, observing that the Mekong is a shared resource, but not a shared responsibility. Everyone draws from the common well, but no single nation feels accountable for its overall health. This modern gambit reveals a new layer of complexity in our ancient struggle to control rivers. The stakes are no longer just national prosperity, but regional stability. A farmer in Cambodia and a factory owner in Laos are now hydrologically linked, their fates decided by a resource that flows through borders it does not recognize. The Mekong forces us to ask whether our political boundaries, drawn on maps, are fundamentally incompatible with the watersheds that sustain us. Can a river truly be managed when it answers to 6 different masters, each one holding a piece of the puzzle, but none possessing the whole picture? The sun beats down on a landscape where life hangs in a delicate balance, a place where the line between sustenance and dust is drawn by water. In the Sahel region of Africa, this ancient struggle has met a modern solution, a grand irrigation scheme designed to harness the life-giving flow of the Niger River. The Office du Niger in Mali is one of the world's largest canal systems, a sprawling network of concrete channels that cuts a geometric pattern across the plains. Its purpose was audacious: to transform arid land into a green sea of commercial rice and cotton fields. For a time, the results seemed miraculous. The canals brought water to where only drought had persisted, enabling harvests that reduced national food imports and created thousands of jobs in a region desperate for economic hope. This was a development gambit of the highest order, a bet that technology could buffer a nation against the brutal whims of a changing climate. But water, once redirected, creates new currents of conflict. The very canals that promised prosperity for some became instruments of dispossession for others. Traditional pastoralists and farmers, whose lives were woven into the rhythm of the river's natural floodplains, found themselves displaced. Their ancestral lands, now crisscrossed by irrigation ditches, were reallocated for large-scale agriculture. The intricate wetland habitats that once supported biodiversity and local fishing economies began to shrink, altered by the constant engineered flow. The question is not whether the water was needed, but who it was meant to serve. A project hailed as a national triumph can feel like an invasion at the local level, sparking tensions over who truly owns the river's gift. The Sahel's experience holds up a stark mirror to our modern canal gambits. It reveals that the critical factor is not the concrete or the engineering, but the governance. A canal can be a tool for development or a weapon of inequality, and the difference lies entirely in its design and implementation. who was consulted before the diggers arrived. Who benefits from the harvest and who bears the cost of a lost way of life? As climate change intensifies, making droughts more frequent and severe, the pressure to build more of these systems will only grow. Their success and the stability they are meant to bring will hinge on a fragile, essential evolution. They must become more than just hydraulic wonders. They must learn to be adaptive, flexible, and above all, equitable. The future of the Sahel and of countless other regions depends on learning this final, most human lesson, that commanding a river is easy compared to the far greater challenge of sharing it fairly. Deep in the heart of the Amazon, a new kind of gambit is unfolding, one where the stakes are measured not just in currency, but in carbon and cultural survival. Here, the proposal is to carve industrial-scale canals into the labyrinthine river systems, transforming them into aquatic freight corridors for soybeans and minerals. The controversial Hydrovia Araguair-Tocantins project epitomizes this ambition, a plan to dredge, straighten, and dynamite sections of these winding waterways to allow for massive barge convoys. On the surface, it promises a powerful economic boost, slashing the cost of moving Brazil's agricultural and mining wealth to global markets. Yet this engineered efficiency comes with a devastatingly simple equation. Every mile of navigable canal becomes a new artery for exploitation, a ready-made highway piercing into the most remote and ecologically intact regions of the rainforest. The chainsaws and bulldozers follow the barges, clearing vast swaths of forest for new soy plantations and pastures, a process that fragments habitats and displaces the indigenous communities who have called these lands home for millennia. Activist Ts I Surui delivers a stark judgment, calling these canals not progress but invasions. Her words cut to the core of the conflict, framing this not as development, but as a violent encroachment on both a living ecosystem and a way of life. The immediate trade-off seems clear: economic gain for environmental loss, but the true cost is far greater. The Amazon is a massive carbon sink, and its destruction releases billions of tons of greenhouse gases, making a local canal project a matter of global consequence. This modern gambit forces us to see the unbroken thread connecting the pharaohs to the planners in Brasilia. The age-old impulse to command a river for profit is now colliding with the planetary reality that some ecosystems are simply too vital to lose. The question is no longer whether we can reroute a river, but whether we can afford to. A wall of concrete stretches over a mile across the Yangtze River, a barrier so immense it slowed the rotation of the Earth by shifting its mass. China's Three Gorges Dam is the ultimate expression of the modern canal gambit, a project of such staggering scale that it sought to command not just a river, but an entire nation's destiny. Its primary channels are not mere canals, but a colossal, engineered reservoir hundreds of feet deep, a captive lake designed to tame the Yangtze's legendary floods and unleash the power of its current. To make this possible, the rising waters submerged 13 cities, over 1,000 villages, and countless cultural sites, displacing more than 1 million people in a migration of almost biblical scale. Ancient towns that had stood for millennia now lie silent beneath the waves, their histories erased by a single, calculated act of hydrological will. The payoffs were immediate and transformative. The dam's turbines now generate a titanic flow of electricity, powering tens of millions of homes and factories, directly reducing the choking smog from coal-fired plants. Upstream, a once treacherous stretch of river was transformed into a placid, deep water highway, allowing massive cargo ships to sail directly into the heart of China, slashing transport costs and supercharging internal trade. Yet, as engineer Zhang Y somberly notes, we built a wall against nature, but nature finds cracks. The immense weight of the reservoir has triggered thousands of landslides along the unstable banks, threatening new communities. Downstream, the river, starved of the sediment that once fertilized its floodplains, now scours its own bed, weakening the foundations of bridges and levees for hundreds of miles. The very ecosystems that depended on the Yangtze's seasonal pulse are now faltering, with fish populations crashing. The Three Gorges Dam stands as a monument to a 21st century truth that our technological power to reshape the world has far outpaced our understanding of the intricate systems we disrupt. This gambit achieved an economic miracle, yet it forces a difficult reckoning. At what point does the scale of our ambition become a liability, and how do we weigh the undeniable benefits for millions against the profound, and often permanent, costs borne by the environment and displaced communities? On the sun-scorched plains of Australia, a different kind of river flows, one not of water, but of numbers on a screen. The Murray-Darling Basin, a sprawling river system that drains 1/7 of the world's driest inhabited continent, has been transformed by a radical economic experiment. Its lifeblood is governed by a complex web of canals, weirs, and most importantly, a fully fledged water market. Here, water is not just a public resource, it is a private asset that can be bought, sold, and traded like a stock or a commodity. Picture a dairy farmer in Victoria, his irrigation channels fed by a canal, making a difficult calculation. Does he use his annual water allocation to nourish his pasture, or does he sell it for a high price to a vineyard further upstream, pocketing the cash and leaving his own fields to brown? This market-based gambit was designed as a brilliant solution to a brutal reality, a way to ensure that every precious drop flowed to its most economically productive use. For a time, it worked. The system created incredible agricultural wealth, turning parts of the basin into a lush patchwork of vineyards, almond orchards, and rice paddies, all sustained by this engineered and monetized flow. Yet the market's cold logic had a blind spot it could not account for. During a devastating millennium-long drought, the price of water soared. Those who could afford it bought up massive allocations, while others were forced to sell their water rights just to survive. The result was a tragedy of over-extraction. Entire stretches of the river system ran dry. In the lower Darling River, water pools became warm, stagnant, and oxygen-starved. The consequence was horrifying, a series of mass fish kills where millions of native cod and perch perished in a single, suffocating event. The river itself was dying of thirst, its environmental needs entirely traded away in the financial marketplace. This crisis exposed the fundamental tension at the heart of the Australian model. A market can efficiently allocate a resource, but it cannot, on its own, value the river's right to exist. It cannot put a price on the cultural significance of a waterhole to indigenous communities, or on the health of an ecosystem that supports regional towns. The lesson from the Murray-Darling is not that water markets are a failure, but that they are an incomplete tool. They demand a delicate and often difficult counterbalance, a legally guaranteed share of the river's flow that is reserved not for farmers or corporations, but for the river itself. These environmental flows are the river's paycheck, a non-negotiable allocation that ensures its basic health. As climate change tightens its grip, making droughts more intense and frequent, the Australian experience becomes a crucial preview for a water-scarce world. It forces us to ask whether we can truly put a price on every drop without first guaranteeing that some drops are beyond price, reserved for the silent but essential partners in our grand hydrological bargains, the rivers that give us life. A liquid thread now stitches the map of Europe together, from the cold ports of the North Sea to the warm shores of the Black. The Rhine-Main-Danube Canal is this thread, a 2,000-mile-long engineered river that allows a single barge to traverse the continent. Its most astonishing feat is not the distance but the altitude. To cross the continental divide, ships are lifted and lowered through a series of massive locks, a staircase of water that climbs over 1,300 feet, surmounting a mountain range without ever leaving the river. This is more than a trade route. It is a symbol of a continent choosing connection over division. Political scientist Dr. Klaus Fischer calls it a liquid symbol of European unity, a physical manifestation of the European Union's founding principle. The economic logic is profound. A single large barge can carry hundreds of containers, replacing dozens of diesel trucks and easing the chronic congestion on Europe's highways. This shift from road to water slashes carbon emissions, making the canal a green artery for continental commerce, while tourist boats glide past medieval castles and modern cities, showcasing a shared cultural heritage. But this unity is engineered, and like all such constructions, it demands perpetual maintenance. The canal's channel must be constantly dredged to prevent silting, a battle against the natural tendency of rivers to fill their own beds. More critically, the entire system is premised on a climate that no longer exists. Recent summer droughts have caused water levels in the Rhine and Danube to plummet, stranding barges on the riverbed and bringing this vital trade corridor to a grinding halt. The very water needed to float the ships and fill the locks is becoming less reliable, exposing a stark vulnerability. The canal stands as a powerful testament to how canals can become arteries of regional cooperation, binding economies and cultures together. Yet its future hinges on a difficult new reality. This grand gambit, built to conquer geography, now faces a far more elusive opponent, a changing climate that can evaporate the very foundation of its success. There it is, take it, with those 5 words from engineer William Mulholland: the destiny of a continent was rerouted. On a November day in 1913, a torrent of water from the distant Owens Valley crashed into the San Fernando Reservoir, and the city of Los Angeles, a desert town desperate for a future, drank deeply. This was not merely an aqueduct, it was a 230-mile-long straw, siphoning the lifeblood of one landscape to animate another. The Los Angeles Aqueduct was a gambit of pure urban will, a bet that a city could grow beyond any natural limit if it could only command a river from afar. And it worked. The steady flow unleashed a torrent of growth, enabling the explosive sprawl of suburbs, the rise of a film industry, and the birth of a global metropolis. But every drop that reached the burgeoning city was a drop stolen from the Owens Valley. The lush, farm-filled valley began to wither. Owens Lake, a vast inland sea that had sustained ecosystems for millennia, was completely drained within 2 decades, leaving a barren, salt-crusted playa in its place. The winds that swept across this new desert picked up the toxic, alkaline dust, creating some of the most severe air pollution in the nation and plaguing the remaining residents with respiratory illnesses. The resentment in the valley boiled over into outright conflict. Water conduits were dynamited, gates were opened in the dead of night, and a long, bitter war over water rights began, pitting the rural community against the insatiable thirst of the urban giant. This is the stark equation of the modern water gambit, a zero-sum game written in concrete and law. The prosperity of one region was purchased with the environmental collapse of another. The story of Los Angeles forces a difficult question upon us. Can a city built on imported water ever truly be sustainable? Or is its magnificent existence forever shadowed by the ghost of the lake it killed? High on the Ethiopian plateau, a new mountain of concrete now rises from the source of the Blue Nile. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is more than a power project. It is a declaration of economic independence, a nation's bid to finally harness the river that begins within its own borders. For centuries, the waters of the Nile flowed from the Ethiopian highlands down to the deserts of Egypt under a status quo dictated by colonial-era treaties. Agreements that allocated the vast majority of the river's flow to Egypt and Sudan while granting Ethiopia virtually no rights. This dam is Ethiopia's powerful rebuttal to that old order. Its massive reservoir, once filled, will fuel turbines designed to generate enough electricity to power millions of homes and lift the nation from energy poverty, all while earning vital revenue from power exports to neighboring countries. This is the ultimate modern canal gambit, not a ditch in the earth but a colossal plug in the river itself, intended to redraw the economic map of an entire region. Yet this vision of national progress casts a long shadow downstream. In Egypt, a nation that has described the Nile's water as an existential red line, the fear is palpable. The slow, multi-year process of filling the dam's immense reservoir could temporarily reduce the Nile's flow, a potentially catastrophic disruption for a country that relies on the river for over 90% of its fresh water. The timing and speed of this filling process have become the focal point of intense and often stalled diplomatic negotiations. As water policy expert Dr. Yara Selim observes, the Nile is a test of whether sharing can replace scarcity. Her words cut to the heart of the dilemma. Ethiopia sees the dam as a sovereign right to develop its own resources, a chance to turn a natural asset into national prosperity. For Egypt, it represents a direct threat to the hydrological lifeline that has sustained its civilization for millennia. Sudan, caught in the middle, faces both potential benefits from regulated flows and dire risks from any operational mismanagement. This standoff proves a timeless truth that the economic maps drawn by water are never finished. The same fundamental conflict that played out between ancient kingdoms now unfolds in meeting rooms between modern nations, armed not with spears but with hydrological models and satellite data. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is a monument to ambition, a testament to what a nation believes it can achieve by commanding a river, but its ultimate legacy will be determined not by concrete and turbines, but by the far more fragile materials of trust, cooperation, and the difficult acknowledgement that a river belongs to everyone and no one all at once. A city built on an island with no aquifers of its own should not exist, yet Singapore thrives. Its survival hinges on a delicate hydraulic pact, a series of water agreements with its closest neighbor, Malaysia. For decades, pipelines crossing the Johor Strait have carried raw water south, where Singapore's sophisticated treatment plants purify it for its millions of residents and its water-intensive semiconductor factories. This imported flow has been the lifeblood of an economic miracle, allowing a nation with no natural resources to become a global hub of finance and technology. The agreements themselves are masterpieces of foresight, negotiated during the city-state separation from Malaysia, embedding water security into the very foundation of its sovereignty. They are a form of high-stakes diplomacy, where the flow of water is inextricably linked to the flow of political relations, and like any long-term partnership, it has seen periods of harmony and sharp disagreement, with disputes flaring over the price of water and the duration of the treaties. This persistent vulnerability, this reliance on a neighbor who could one day turn off the tap, forced Singapore to make a critical decision. It could not afford to be permanently dependent. So it launched a national crusade to engineer its own hydrological destiny. The result is a system so advanced it has turned scarcity into a strategic advantage. The heart of this system is NE-Water, a brand name for highly purified reclaimed water. Singapore takes every drop of its used water, from sinks and showers and factories, and puts it through a rigorous multi-stage cleansing process involving microfiltration, reverse osmosis, and ultraviolet disinfection. The result is water so pure it exceeds drinking water standards, and it is pumped back into the reservoirs to blend with rainwater, creating a closed-loop system that dramatically reduces reliance on imported supplies. Alongside this, massive desalination plants humming with energy now turn the endless saltwater surrounding the island into fresh, potable water. These technological marvels did not emerge from a vacuum. They were the direct consequence of a political gambit, a diplomatic relationship that, while essential, was too volatile to be the sole foundation of a nation's existence. Singapore's leaders understood that true security in the canal economy did not come from a better treaty, but from the power to walk away from the negotiating table if necessary. This relentless drive for self-sufficiency has transformed a national weakness into a global strength. Singapore is now a living laboratory for water technology, exporting its expertise in recycling and desalination to a world increasingly parched by climate change. Its model demonstrates a profound shift in the ancient game of canal gambits. The goal is no longer just to control a river, but to master the entire hydrological cycle, to create a resilient, multi-source water supply that can withstand both political disputes and environmental shocks. In a future of rising tensions over shared rivers, Singapore's story offers a crucial lesson. The ultimate power lies not in controlling the source, but in possessing the ingenuity to create your own. The ghost ships of the Aral Sea stand as skeletal monuments in a desert of their own making. These rusting hulks were once a vibrant fishing fleet, bobbing on what was the world's fourth largest inland lake. Today, they list on dry sand, surrounded by the brittle shells of dead clams, a haunting image of an ecosystem that was entirely sacrificed. The cause was a single-minded economic gambit. Soviet planners in Moscow decreed that the deserts of Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan would become a white sea of cotton. To achieve this, they diverted the two great rivers that fed the Aral Sea, the Amu Darya and the Sadarya, into a vast, inefficient web of irrigation canals. The cotton harvest soared, temporarily fulfilling state quotas, but the sea itself was given a death sentence. With 90% of its incoming water stolen, the Aral began a rapid, shocking retreat. The shoreline receded for dozens of miles, leaving behind a salty, toxic crust. Winds whipped this dust, laden with pesticides and fertilizers from the cotton fields, into poisonous storms that swept over villages, leading to spiraling rates of respiratory illness and cancer. A thriving fishing industry that once employed tens of thousands collapsed overnight, shattering the economic and cultural backbone of entire communities. This was perhaps the most devastating lesson in the entire history of canal gambits, a demonstration that it is possible to win a 5-year economic plan while losing an entire sea. Yet, in the early 2000s, a sliver of hope emerged. The World Bank partnered with Kazakhstan to undertake a monumental act of redemption. They constructed a massive dam, the Aral Dike, to corral the waters of the Sadarya, effectively creating a smaller, separate northern Aral Sea. The results were almost immediate and breathtaking. The water level rose by meters, the salinity dropped, and the microclimate began to recover. Fish returned to the rejuvenated waters, and with them, the fishing boats. The partial restoration of the northern Aral offers a powerful, if fragile, counter-narrative. It proves that with international cooperation, smarter infrastructure, and a commitment to ecological balance, some of the damage can be undone. The ships in the southern desert remain as a permanent warning, while the returning waves in the north whisper a tentative promise that our most catastrophic hydrological mistakes need not be our final legacy. A century ago, the Everglades was a slow-moving river of grass, 50 miles wide and just a few inches deep, flowing steadily from Lake Okeechobee to the Florida Bay. This vast, shallow sheet of water was the lifeblood of a unique ecosystem, a sprawling wetland that supported an astonishing diversity of life. Then came the dredges. In the early 20th century, a monumental engineering gambit was launched to drain the swamp, to reclaim the land for sugarcane and citrus, for cattle and sprawling suburbs. A web of canals was carved into the soft limestone, straight and deep, designed to rush water off the land and out to sea as quickly as possible. This was a war against water itself, and for a time it seemed like a brilliant victory. Florida's economy boomed, its agricultural output soared, and new cities sprouted where alligators and panthers once roamed. The economic map was redrawn in concrete and sugarcane. But the river of grass was dying of thirst. The intricate, slow-moving hydrology that nurtured the entire system was shattered. Fresh water that should have seeped south to sustain the sawgrass prairies and mangrove estuaries was instead being flushed wastefully into the Atlantic and the Gulf. Saltwater began creeping inland, poisoning freshwater aquifers. The very species that defined the region, from the elusive Florida panther to the gentle manatee dependent on freshwater springs, were pushed to the brink. The canals that promised prosperity were now delivering an ecological crisis. In a stunning reversal, society is now attempting to undo its own handiwork. The comprehensive Everglades restoration plan is one of the most ambitious ecological repair projects ever conceived, a multi-billion-dollar effort to literally replumb Florida. The new gambit is not about controlling water, but about relearning its rhythm. Engineers are dismantling old levees, backfilling canals, and building massive reservoirs and stormwater treatment areas. The goal is to recreate the slow, shallow flow of the original river of grass, to cleanse the water of agricultural pollutants in artificial wetlands before guiding it back to its ancient paths. This is a canal gambit in reverse, a profound admission that our past victories came at too high a cost. It proves that redrawing an economic map is not always about digging new channels, but sometimes about having the wisdom to erase the old ones, to listen to the land, and to finally learn the difference between conquering a landscape and coexisting with it. The ancient cradle of civilization now faces a modern-day water crisis. High in the mountains of Turkey, concrete giants like the massive Ilisu Dam on the Tigris River are holding back the very currents that once gave life to Mesopotamia. For downstream nations, this is not just an engineering project, it is a slow-motion stranglehold. In southern Iraq, the vast Mesopotamian marshes, a wetland ecosystem that has survived for millennia and is home to unique cultures, are beginning to parch. Farmers who have tilled the soil for generations watch their crops wither as the river's flow becomes unpredictable, a resource now controlled by a tap in a faraway capital. This is the 23rd gambit, a stark demonstration that the control of water has become a primary tool of geopolitical power. Hydrologist Dr. Rania Al-Mansouri delivers a chilling assessment, stating plainly that water wars are no longer metaphor, they are reality. Her words echo across a region where dwindling river flows are exacerbating political conflicts and deepening humanitarian crises. When a nation upstream can single-handedly dictate the agricultural viability and ecological health of a nation downstream, every drop of water becomes a potential weapon. This modern struggle is a direct echo of the ancient Sumerian battles with the same rivers, proving a sobering truth. The canal gambits that once built empires are now pivotal in shaping the fragile peace of entire regions, reminding us that the flow of water remains inextricably linked to the flow of human destiny. The climate itself is now changing the board on which all our water gambits are played. Rising global temperatures are not just warming the air, they are fundamentally rewriting the hydrological cycle that civilizations have depended on for millennia. Glaciers that fed great rivers for centuries are retreating, rainfall patterns are shifting from predictable seasons to erratic deluges and prolonged droughts, and sea levels are creeping higher, threatening to salinate the coastal farmlands that feed billions. This new volatility demands a new kind of canal, one designed not for conquest but for resilience. The proposed strategies are as ambitious as any from the age of pharaohs. Imagine a continent spanning aqueduct to channel floodwaters from a sodden region to a parched one, or a network of perimeter canals around coastal megacities like Jakarta or Miami, acting as both storm surge barriers and controlled floodplains. These are not mere infrastructure projects, they are potential lifelines, but their success hinges on a critical evolution in our approach. As climate scientist Dr. James O'Donnell warns, the next generation of canals must work with nature, not against it. This means embracing green engineering, using natural landscapes like restored wetlands to filter and store water instead of relying solely on concrete channels. It means weaving artificial intelligence into the very fabric of these systems. Smart canals embedded with networks of sensors could constantly monitor water levels, quality, and flow, allowing an AI to make real-time decisions, opening and closing gates to optimize distribution, prevent flooding, and conserve every precious drop during a drought. The age of using water to redraw our economic maps is far from over. If anything, it is entering its most critical chapter. But the gambits of the future will be judged by a new standard, not by how much water they control, but by how wisely they manage it within the fragile, interconnected system of our warming planet. Every canal ever dug began as a line on a balance sheet long before it was a trench in the earth. These colossal undertakings are more than concrete and water. They are the physical embodiment of economic theories made manifest. Consider the fever of Britain's canal mania, a perfect case of Adam Smith's invisible hand in action. Private investors, chasing profit with no grand design, collectively stitched the nation together with a web of waterways, believing that individual gain would magically yield collective prosperity. Contrast this with the monumental public works of the Great Depression, where governments, guided by Keynesian principles, hired the unemployed to build dams and canals, using public spending as a deliberate stimulus to revive a faltering economy. The choice of who pays for a canal and why fundamentally shapes its purpose and its legacy. This is where the dry language of economics meets the wet reality of a river's flow. Every project undergoes a rigorous, though often flawed, cost-benefit analysis. Planners tally the expected gains, like increased trade and agricultural output, against the immense upfront costs of excavation and materials. But these calculations have a notorious blind spot, a failure to properly account for externalities. These are the hidden costs or benefits that fall on people not involved in the transaction. The pollution from a new factory enabled by a canal is a negative externality, a debt paid by the local community in clean air. The flood protection offered by a well-managed reservoir is a positive externality, a gift to downstream towns. When these real-world impacts are ignored on the spreadsheet, the true price of a canal is never truly known. Economist Dr. Maria Gonzalez puts it perfectly, observing that canals are physical manifestations of economic ideologies. A laissez-faire approach might build a network quickly, but it could neglect maintenance and environmental protection. A centrally planned system might achieve a grand strategic goal, but at the cost of local displacement and ecological ruin. This leads to the powerful, often invisible force of path dependency. The initial decision to build a canal in a specific location creates a cascade of future investments, locking a region into a particular economic trajectory for centuries. A city grows there because the canal is there, and then railways and highways follow the canal's path, making it astronomically expensive to ever choose a different route, even if a better one becomes apparent. This is why some failed gambits linger on life support, their original purpose gone but their infrastructural gravity too strong to escape. Understanding these theories is not an academic exercise, it is a vital tool for our future. When we evaluate a modern proposal, whether it is a new shipping lane or a massive irrigation scheme, we must look beyond the engineering blueprints. We must ask which economic ideology is driving the project, whose costs are being externalized, and what irreversible paths we are locking ourselves into. The most successful canal gambits of the future will be those that are not just marvels of engineering, but are also financially sound and socially just, ventures that learn from the economic ghosts of waterways past. A river rerouted carries more than water, it carries the memories of a place. The economic maps drawn by canals are layered over a far more delicate parchment, the cultural and social fabric of human life. For every booming port city, there is a submerged village, its streets and stories lost beneath the reservoir of progress. The intricate canal networks of Venice and Amsterdam did not just facilitate trade, they birthed entirely unique urban identities. In these cities, water is not a feature, it is the foundation. The rhythm of life is set by the lapping of waves against stone, the call of the gondolier, the sound of bicycles crossing arched bridges. This aquatic reality has become their global brand, a cultural heritage so powerful it now fuels a massive tourism economy. But this identity was forged by a deliberate gambit, a choice to live with and build upon the water, creating a culture inseparable from its engineered environment. In stark contrast, the construction of a modern dam often submerges a different kind of heritage. For many indigenous communities, a river is not a resource to be managed, but a relative to be honored. Its course is woven into creation stories, its pools are sacred sites, its flow marks the passage of ancestral time. When a new canal or reservoir floods these places, it does not just displace people from their homes, it severs them from their history and spiritual center. The protests that rise from these valleys are not merely about compensation, they are a defense of a worldview, a plea for the recognition that some landscapes hold a value that can never be quantified on an engineer's blueprint. Anthropologist Dr. Kenji Tanaka puts it with profound simplicity, stating that when you change a river, you change a people. His words echo from the drowned temples of the three gorges to the contested headwaters of the Amazon. Canal-driven migrations have repeatedly redrawn human geography, pushing populations into new territories where they must forge fresh traditions or cling fiercely to old ones in a foreign land. These shifts can spark powerful social movements, uniting disparate groups under the banner of water justice, and they can also give rise to entirely new cultural practices, from the songs of the laborers who dug the Panama Canal to the water festivals that now celebrate the reclaimed rivers of soul. The true ledger of any canal gambit must therefore include these human stories. It must account for the silenced language, the forgotten festival, the relocated grave. The most profound cost of redrawing a map is often paid not in currency, but in the intangible currency of belonging, a price extracted from communities long after the engineers have departed and the economic reports have been filed away. From the ancient silt of Mesopotamia to the modern concrete of mega dams, the story of our canal gambits reveals a timeless truth. Water is the ultimate currency of civilization. Every empire that rose, every trade route that flourished, and every city that sprawled did so on the back of a managed river. We have witnessed how these hydraulic ventures built empires, fueled industries, and sparked conflicts, a cycle of ambition and consequence that has redrawn our world map time and again. The hard lessons etched into these waterways speak not of failure, but of a necessary evolution in our thinking. The goal can no longer be to dominate a river, but to partner with it, to use our technology and hard-won wisdom to navigate a future of growing uncertainty. As we reflect on these historical mysteries, it becomes clear that every drop flowing through a canal carries the immense weight of history and the fragile promise of tomorrow. This journey through water and time reminds us that the next great gambit is always taking shape, always just around the river bend, waiting for the choices we make today. If this exploration has intrigued you, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more deep dives into the powerful forces that shape our